Good to see you boys. Hey, so for tuning in here today, coffee experts, you're in the right spot, especially if you're thinking about starting a drive-through or you're thinking about starting another drive-through. This is the place where you want to be. Today's
Mhm.
topic is someone you don't want to miss. Today, we're going to talk about, yeah, but what when you're successful? What about when you're successful? Because it's a much different battle on that side of it than on the other side when you're stressed about money. So, man, I hope you're going to enjoy today's show. Hey, coffee experts, those of you running independent coffee shops, you're always looking for ways that you can drop your costs. And we here at the Coffee Experts Club really understand that. And so we've started something called Indie Coffee Coalition. And what it's designed to do is to drop your costs on two of the things that you're probably experiencing the highest sales volume in your store. And that is energy drink and frat mix. Those two line items, we've created our own products and are offering you those products at a reduced cost so that you can cut out the Red Bull of America. You can cut out the main lines of energy drinks that you're doing and serve your own energy drink at a reduced cost on a line item that you're probably already making a lot of sales on anyway. The best way that you can grow sales is by dropping your costs and maintaining a current volume. So check us out at indiecoffee.co and we'll love to tell you more there.
Welcome to the Coffee Experts Club, where we discuss all of the insights, expertise, and drama that goes into making your passion your profession. Our hosts, Aaron, Ben, and Drew, are three coffee experts who have taken their coffee experience and turned it into true expertise. They have consulted with major coffee brands throughout the United States and beyond, providing operations expertise and growth strategy for drive-through openings, multiple locations, and everything in between. So brew yourself a cup and hang out a bit with the Coffee Experts Club.
Ben, Drew, excellent to see you guys. How are you guys today?
Good to be here. As usual.
Well, Ben, the reason why we decided to talk about this today was you showed up on our weekly level 10 meeting for Collab team. And you're like, man, our client is kicking ass and taking names, like
Mhm.
$1.7 million store, $1.2 million store. It's kicking ass, taking names. And I think it generated this question. I thought you had you're the one that was the idea machine on today's topic. And that was, okay, so what about when you're successful? What about when things are going good? What about when money's rolling in? Because I think a lot of times on this show, we're on the other side of it of how do we cut costs? How do we make savings? How do
Yep.
we get money to stretch? How do you, maybe think through bringing some of your like energy drinks in-house so that you don't have to keep paying Red Bull. You can cut down your costs by, going with a white label like Indie Coffee Coalition, shameless plug, or creating your own energy drink. So let's talk about today. Okay, but what about when you're rolling? What about when
Mhm.
money's in? Because I think it's a good topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy. I mean, it's just human nature, right? It's easy for us to focus on the negative and focus on the problem. Like, there's always something wrong. Okay, well, yeah, if your store's doing $1 million, I mean, there's a lot of something that's right there. And so, what do you do when you've been so focused, especially as like a new coffee company? If you're on your one, two, three, four locations, and you've just, for the last couple of years, you've just been essentially grinding and trying to like capture every single customer you can. Like, what happens when you hit that point where you like look up for a second? You're like, oh my god, I'm like, we're doing really well right now. Like, do
Yeah.
you take your foot off the gas? Do you slow down for a little bit? Do you reprioritize? Do you take that extra revenue and put it somewhere else? I think that's a lot of stuff that can get lost because you're so focused on just grinding it out day after day that it's good to kind of think through, okay, we've made it. I don't think you ever make it in business, but we're out of the keeping our head above water scenario, and we're in the like, okay, we can see land. We're actually walking on land. We're actually making this thing work. What are the practical things that we should do next? We talk about a lot on the cost saving side of starting to bring stuff in house, but when you're doing really well as a company and you're bringing in lots of extra revenue, that's a great time to move to that position as well if you haven't already. Just because it's you've got the dollars coming in, why not make even more dollars come in down the road for yourself? So I think it's definitely worthwhile to think about, and I think a lot of if you're not careful, it can be easy to once the bank accounts are fat, start spending money every which way or the other, or start making decisions because you have the extra capital that you wouldn't have made before. So the biggest thing I would say for people who have quote unquote made it or who their coffee shop is rolling very well is to not be complacent and still make very intelligent decisions like you were when you were grinding and still trying to capture every customer. I think some of the smartest people when it comes to just finances period, is they think and they plan and they make decisions, 4 years in, very similarly to how they did when they were 1 year in. Meaning that when it's your first year, you're looking at every penny, you're looking at every line item, and you know exactly where every dollar bill is going. Once you've become successful and you've got a really good capital coming in, you should not change that. It's just you're going to be looking at larger numbers, but you should still be knowing where every dollar is going, having a weekly scorecard, know every line item, because if that changes just because you've got, money coming in, well, if something happens and that money stops for some reason, or, maybe you have, God forbid, a shop burned down and you've lost your biggest player of your 3 or 4 shops, well, then you can't just spend willy nilly like you'd started to do.
Yeah, let me say this before we jump into, if you're listening to the show and you're pissed off as we talk about this topic, where you're like, mother effers, who's doing 1.7? I'm going to kill somebody. I would just say this, like at the end of the show, Ben and Drew, let's try and tuck in a little bit at the end of how we feel like, why we feel like this particular client is actually killing it so hard. Because I think that maybe those of you who might get frustrated hearing about other shops doing so well just need to realize, no, that is possible. And what could you change? What do you need to be thinking through? What does your next shop need to look like to be able to generate revenue like that? Because I think that that is very attainable in coffee, but there's some secret in the sauce. So we can talk about that towards the end. Drew, what are your thoughts on that? Give me your take on rolling in the dough.
Well, I think there's a time and a place to mature. You know what I mean? There's a time to level up. I think as we set off into the business, we don't know where it's going to go. We don't know what year 1, 2, or 3 is going to look like. And so we have short-term goals.
Yep.
We want to accomplish quarterly goals or an annual goal. But as you grow, as you start making money, you do want to start thinking a little bit more, what's going to happen over the horizon. Do I have contingencies for problems like Ben said, if your store burns down or another COVID hits? God forbid, that there's a time to start planning for, unless you want to stay small, which some people want to stay small. Some people want 2 or 3 stores. That's great. They're happy. More power to you. That's amazing. That's your jam. That's great. But if you want to build, if you want to grow, when you are making a lot of money, it provides you the headspace to plan out those moves where, let's say something does happen, suddenly you don't have that money anymore. You got to remake it, but you at least planned ahead. You look forward to what is it going to be like when the store is thriving? What is it going to be like when I have more ability? What types of decisions are actually possible for me to make? And where's my heart at when I do have this money for the business? Do I want to invest more in the culture? Do I want to invest more in infrastructure? Do I want to do more marketing? What types of, where is it that I want to spend that money? So I think, when the money's coming in, that's amazing. Be cautious. I think it's good to have a safety net. I'll always say have a safety net just in case, just in case the safety net ends up, if you don't have one, the safety net ends up being you pulling shots, which is never the best ideal scenario. So I think it's great when money's there. You should use the time and the headspace to plan ahead for when you are, a legacy brand that everybody knows. And hopefully that, you stay in that phase of the business for a good while.
I think that, so let's talk real, like experiences that we've had. We've had several coffee shops that have attained to that level of stores, of this caliber. I will say the one that all 3 of us were a part of was Roasters, right at the very beginning, where Roasters had several stores that were at $1.2 million, $1.5 million plus, locations, $1.7 million, cafes and drive-throughs, all of them drive-throughs, right? But some of them did have cafe feature. I know I started with Wes store 4 coming into store 5, and he was building the roastery. It was a roastery and going to be a cafe. And then from there we go with him to 15, and then exited. When you were with him from ground zero, Drew, when did you enter in?
And the same time as you. They just built Southbridge.
Yeah. So 4 to 5, right? And so I would say there's probably a season that you want to be thinking about money, right? So let's say, I know the client that we're talking about, Ben, they have 2 locations, they're building their 3rd, right? So it's like, they're probably in a different season than when Wes was in location 8, 9, 10, you know what I mean? Like, and are rolling in money. And there's probably going to be different decisions that are made in bull season. A younger company that's been around for a few years is probably going to want to, and this is something I really did respect about Wes. I know Wes spent money in ways that I did not respect, but one of the like going to Vegas with a bunch of teenage people. But I will say one of the ways I did feel like that he did really well was he kept money in the business. Like I felt like he continued to allow money to grow in the business. And as we made more money on locations, we opened new locations. I mean, it
Yeah.
was a business for 9 years. They opened 15 locations. Like we credit where credit's due, man. Respect where respect's due. Like that is a huge and quick growth trajectory to get to a spot where you have a big franchise like a BlackRock say they want to swing in and purchase you. You know what I mean? So I think that it probably depends on what season of the business you're in, where you're going to lean. And like you said, like, is this a season to lean into continuing to build the business? Is this a season to lean into culture? We're going to make a culture investment here because culture investments can be expensive. We're going to lean into a season of the business where there's actually infrastructure development, which I would say infrastructure development could be buying new machines. I'd say infrastructure development could be maybe you start buying your own land, right? You're building your own buildings
Yep.
instead of doing land leases. So I think it probably depends the season that you're in when it comes to how you're going to spend.
No, I think that's a really great point because the last thing that you want to be is a flash in the pan brand.
Yep.
So, and that's that difference between we're a young company who's doing really well and we're a 5 to 10 year old company who's doing really well. A 5 to 10 year old company who's doing really well, I would say, to Drew's point, you have to think about, okay, where do we want to take this in the next 10 years? We're at 10 locations. Do we want to be at 30? Because
Right.
then you've been in business for 10 years. You've got essentially a proof of concept of your entire method. You
Right.
can say, we've got all these locations. We're extremely, from a gross revenue standpoint, we're extremely profitable. So from there, it's just math. It's how X amount of dollars equals this X amount of shops, which means X amount of revenue come in. And then it's just you're leveraging your dollars that you can invest in new locations. If you're that young brand who's extremely profitable, I think to your point, Aaron, that money should be invested back into infrastructure so that you're not a flash in the pan type of brand where everybody loved right out the gate. You've got all the customers, but then because you're so young, you're so immature, you don't have the operational systems in place. You don't have the management in place. You don't have the, your borrowed time on your machines essentially, or maybe you've got leases that what you're paying is going to be increasing as your revenue increases. So I think if you're young and your revenue looks good, you should be investing inwards. I would say probably as much as you can. If you're seasoned and mature, you probably have all those systems in place. That's probably why your company's 10 years old and you're extremely profitable. Take that then, and if you're wanting to grow, that's where you start running the math on, okay, how much and how quickly can I scale and start really like increasing revenue to the nth degree.
Hey, experts, we've got something really awesome that we do here at Coffee Experts Club, and that's called the My First Drive-Through Coffee Masterclass. So if you're opening your next coffee shop, I think a lot of times you may think to yourself, I know what goes into opening a coffee shop. I've been doing this for years, but maybe you've been doing it for somebody else. And maybe this is your first option of starting a coffee shop on your own. Or maybe you don't know anything about coffee and you're just like, I'm looking for a good investment opportunity. Starting a coffee shop seems like a good place to put it. And you're going to enter into it. But what you don't know is all the things that you don't know, right? And so what we've done with this masterclass is taken behind the scenes how you find your first location, what you need to be thinking about in finding a location. We give you a gift in the masterclass where it's a step-by-step process of how you're opening your coffee shop, the different checkpoints you need from coming up with your plans and talking with the city and then negotiating a lease. And then how do you build a team and what are the different pieces you need to be thinking about? It's a great masterclass, door to door, start to finish, completely free on opening up your next coffee drive-through. So check it out. It's at myfirstdrivethrough.coffee and it's a great masterclass. You won't regret it. We'll see you on the inside there. Yeah, Drew, do you want to talk a little bit about culture? Because I think that you really love culture. That's something you really build on. I will say this. I know we throw a lot of shade at Wes from time to time when it comes to how he spent, when he spent, but I will say, like, he did build a cult following with the people that worked for him. Like, he built a strong culture. I mean, he took all you guys to Hawaii one year, right? Like, with like all the management team. So I do think he did invest a lot in culture. I think that was when you were at like store 6, 7, I think is when he did the Hawaii trip, but still like enough revenue coming in where it justified, let's make a culture infusion. I would just say there are things on those trips that you want to be careful with, like things that can get you into trouble, things that you want to be above board on, like that sometimes or sometimes didn't happen in those days. But I will say a culture infusion is super important. And Drew, I think we're feeling some of that. I mean, honest transparency, we're feeling some of that down in Belize right now as we're trying to really build like a following and people that want to follow us and people that want to be dedicated to us and people that want to work here a long time. Maybe speak to that a little bit. You do really well talking on this stuff.
Yeah. Sorry that you didn't get invited to Hawaii.
No, I'm not going to hurt feelings. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, culture to me is a top value. You know, obviously the business exists first and it has to, right? So once we have a business, once we can do something with the business, I think culture is in this day and age, what's going to keep employees around. You know, people nowadays, they migrate from job to job to job and they float around, you know, using the same skills. They're not really ever challenged. They don't feel like they belong in a lot of places. And culture to me, and from the roasters days and carried on to now, it's important to have a place where people can feel that they can come and be themselves and be healthy and be challenged properly and grow at their own rate. You know, we have people here who have been with us since day one who don't really want to grow or change. And that's great. You know, we'll provide some opportunities for them to grow and change. And if they don't rise to the occasion, you know, they just want to be a closer, that's totally fine. And then there's, you know, on the other side, people who are almost overly ambitious, and we have to come up with creative new ways to challenge these folks to keep them engaged. But culture as a sense of belonging, it's intangible. You know, it's priceless. There's a certain amount of money we can set aside to go towards that, to plan events, to plan trips, to do dinners, to provide, you know, team bonding experiences. But really the return on that, you can't measure. You know, you can't really measure what comes back from those dollars. But a culture, and our mission statement here is to build a community. I think that we've been doing a really good job of that. We have our first staff trip. I was looking at pictures, and all of the people except one are still with us from that staff trip 2 years ago. And those are all original hires. So, I mean, I can't overstress the importance of a good culture, a place where people feel like they belong and they are making an impact, where they have their place in the community that they live in. You know, a lot of people don't feel like they're really engaged in the community. And I think that we like to feel like we're making a difference. You know, we know the people working at the stores. We know the people when we go out and go shopping, or if we go to the theater, or if we go get gas, you know, whatever, when we're out and about and we see people we know, it makes a difference when you can go out and see 10 people and you know all their drinks and you know a little bit about their family. Yeah, you're part of the community. I think that's special.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely a real sense of when you have a brand that the community loves and the people who work inside that company love working for that company, it creates a sense of pride. I mean, it was always the joke that we always ran is like, whenever I go out to the bar, I'm always like, hey, coffee guy, there's the coffee guy. And it creates a sense of pride and like, oh yeah, you know, I serve these people. They know who I am. I know who they are in the community. And it does, to your point, Drew, really kind of cement your company and your employees to the community, but also vice versa. Like it really becomes that relationship that is, I mean, yeah, you can't put a price tag on it. You can't put an ROI on it, but that is what I think drives your coffee company, your brand inside your community to that. I mean, what we always talk about, that hometown hero status, is if your employees are out and about and, you know, they're getting shouted down at the grocery store is like, hey, coffee girl, hey, coffee guy, good to see you. Like that's an intangible that you can't get from your bottom line of COGS. You can't get out of your payroll, you know, cell on your spreadsheet. That just comes straight from, like you're saying, investing in that culture.
Yeah. I think too, like, so we've talked about culture, and I want to make sure I'm sensitive to the last few minutes, really speaking on what makes a successful coffee shop from our perspective. So I will say having something like a capital expenses list of, hey, what are we going to invest in next? We have a next big spend. You know, Drew and I are really looking at into solar banking so we can protect our machines, because Billy's deals with a lot of dirty power. You know what I mean? Where it's brown power, where it can really fry our 220. It really is hard on the espresso machines. Drew has been like neck deep, like literally in these machines in ways we never had to at roasters because it's a power problem. So for us, but to go with a solar, with a power bank and a possible generator, that's a big spend. That's a lot of money. And that's not something you just do like haphazardly. So I think creating a capital expenses list where you're like, hey, so in order, these are the things that we're going to begin to invest in when we do want to invest in infrastructure. You know, Drew and I have talked a lot about marketing and swag and making a name through literally making people your billboard, you know, by putting swag on bodies, and not trying to make money off swag, but like using it as a marketing tool to get your name known better. I mean, that's what billboards are all across every state, every country is awareness, brand awareness. You know what I mean? And I think that there are times where as you come into money, you're like, okay, so I've reserved this for Drew and I've been really intentional. When are we going to engage in a stronger marketing push? You know what I mean? Because marketing dollars cost. When are we going to invest now in new machines? Like, because new machines cost, And then, like we're saying now, when do we need to make a decision on cultural push? Because I think culture is a really important thing. So I think probably those are the 3 areas I would say really consider when you're thinking about as you're coming into money. And I think it really should be dictated on what season is your business in. And Ben, you started the conversation great with how big do you want to get? Because if you don't want to keep getting, then that becomes the answer of your question, right? And maybe asking yourself, how deep do I want to be in this business? Or do I want to spin this business into other businesses by stripping revenue out and doing something new? So I think there could be a couple new ventures that you think about that come out of the backside of that, things that Drew and I are talking about that I get excited about too. Let's talk real quick, Ben, about, because it's your client right now. What do you think is this new company, been around just a few years, kicking ass, taking names, these 2 locations, 1.7, 1.2, what would you say is the secret to the sauce?
Yeah, I think right out the gate is knowing exactly what you are and what you want. Similar to you guys down in Belize, we are drive-through coffee. We're going to serve a great product as fast as we can, and we're going to make sure that that we love the people that we're serving it to. I think they've done exactly that up here.
Yeah,
they've been extremely smart and strategic about their pricing, and when they need to increase prices, I know we've talked about that a lot in the past.
Yep.
Not holding on to your retail price point for so long that it bites you in the butt.
Yeah.
And to be frankly honest, we're talking about gross revenue here. We're up in Washington State. Prices are high here. Prices are really high here compared to a West Virginia, compared to a South Carolina, compared to a Texas. So just naturally, our revenues up here are going to be higher because charging more per drink. I just did a pricing round around the big 3 players in coffee up here: Starbucks, Dutch Bros. We've got Wake Up Call. The average for a 20-ounce iced energy drink was nearly $7 for an energy drink that they're probably have got white labeled in house, or they're making their own.
Right.
So an iced extra sweet vanilla latte was pushing about the same. So that in and of itself is going to drive your revenue up extremely high. But the key that a good brand can do, what this brand is doing, is they've got that high revenue, but they're also keeping their costs low. They're doing stuff like working with DrinkWorks, with Indie.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben. I didn't mean to cut you off on the plug that you're going to give shameless plug for us. I would say too, like, how do you feel like their location? I feel like there are 2 things that really play to their favor is location. I feel like their locations are strong, right? Ingress, egress, a lot of traffic, right? So that it's just a percentage game, right? That's what separates an A player on a location is, or how much of a percentage are you peeling off of the gross number of cars on the boulevard out in front of you. You should know those numbers before you make a decision on your next location. And I think too, they were in a real strategic move for Hometown Hero, right? Because Roasters faded out, Black Rock bottom, and then they got in that battle with Wake Up Call and who should own them. Wake Up Call actually ended up winning, right? But by that time, they had lost all the momentum of Hometown Hero. And I think that the new brand swung in and really was able to capture Hometown Hero.
Yeah, and on top of that, if you can leverage your experience, I mean, they're not brand new to the coffee industry. They know what they're doing.
Yep.
If you can either leverage your own experience or the experience of, folks like us, this podcast, coffeeexpertsacademy.com, if you can leverage that, and it does, you immediately, which is exactly what they did, erase the first 3 years of learning what to do to become successful. Like we did at Roasters, it took us 3 or 4 years to learn what to do and implement these systems. And they were immediately able to start at like year 4, essentially is what it took us. And they're straight out the gate. They know how to run orders. They know how to have an ideal POS system set up. They know how to managerially structure their locations. They know how to hire, fire. So all of this learning that it took us on the ground over years of saying, okay, this is how we perfect it. They were able to start right out the gate and then just immediately start making that revenue.
Yeah. It's good stuff. All righty, guys. Well, another episode, Coffee Experts. I hope you enjoyed our time together. Ben, Drew, always excellent to be with you two guys. And we'll see you guys back here on Coffee Experts next week. See you then.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Thanks so much for joining us today. For those of you who are looking to become a coffee expert yourself, we offer an incredible, thorough training online for opening your first coffee drive-thru at www.myfirstdrivethru.coffee.